I woke up at 2 o'clock this morning worrying what I was going to do for groceries. And I worked 50 years as a nurse.
By the time I pay for gas and rent, I don't have no money. Can't get by.
I don't mind being hungry for a couple days, but I definitely don't want to be on the streets.
According to Hunger Free Vermont, 2 in 5, or over a third of Vermonters, are food insecure. During the pandemic, people of color were 10 times more likely to face food insecurity. And it's not just access to food. Vermont is the second smallest state in the union by population, but has the second highest rate of homelessness behind California. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us across the fence. I'm Jolie Whitney. For many Vermonters, concerns about what to put on the table and where to sleep are a part of life. In a new documentary, Just Getting By, award-winning director Bess O'Brien looks at the day-to-day lives of Vermonters facing food and housing insecurity, as well as people on the front lines helping to keep their fellow Vermonters fed. Bess O'Brien has a long history of documenting challenges that Vermonters face, from the opioid crisis to domestic abuse to prison reentry. She joins me in studio to talk about her latest film, Just Getting By. Thank you for talking with me today, Bess.
Thank you.
And as I just mentioned, you've covered a variety of topics about different issues in Vermont. What made you consider food insecurity?
Well, I heard that same statistic that you just said, which is 40% of Vermonters struggle with food insecurity, and that was pretty astounding to me. And I thought, well, that's something I'd like to explore and try to find out more about. And so that's where I started with the film, but very quickly it also became evident that many people who were struggling with food insecurity were also struggling with housing insecurity. And many of the people that we started to talk to were in the hotels, the temporary hotel program. So that became a big theme in the movie because, as I'm sure you know and most of your listeners know, the hotels have been a place for keeping folks off the street for many years, but there's been a lot of push to close them over the last 2 years, and deadlines that have been pushed forward and taken back, and so it's been sort of a roller coaster ride with folks in the hotels. So I just sort of, as I started to talk to working people who are struggling to make a living, sort of living paycheck to paycheck, it became clear that both housing and food would work well together.
And food or housing insecurity is something that we hear a lot, but how did you define insecurity in your documentary?
Food insecurity many times means that, a family will not have enough food to get through the month, so they'll have to go to a food shelf. Or they have bought food for the month, but by the end of the month, the parents won't eat breakfast or dinner. They'll give it to their kids instead because there's not enough food that goes around. Or they will, instead of buying more vegetables or foods that they would rather eat, they tend to eat more junk food or cheaper food because they can't afford it. So all of that is food insecurity. It can also literally mean, you are going hungry. So it's a broad term, and many people struggle with it. And housing insecurity is the same thing. Housing insecurity can mean, that you're literally on the street sleeping in a tent. It can mean that you're in a hotel, a temporary hotel, because you can't find housing. It means that you're sleeping on somebody's couch. It means that you're possibly living in a temporary shelter. So all of those, if you do not have a place that you can call your own that is long-term, I would say that means you're probably housing insecure.
And obviously this isn't an issue that's catch-all. There's no one thing contributing to it. But in Vermont, are there any specific characteristics of the state that lead to such a high rate of housing and food insecurity?
Well, I think that, Angie Harmon from Downstreet Housing says this in the film. I think, unfortunately, Vermont has been remiss over 30 years in keeping up with its housing capability. So we have not built enough housing. We've sort of known that, we need more housing and low-income housing, but we really have not been focused enough on that. And so this is really the chickens coming home to roost. We have finally gotten to a place where there are too many people that need housing, and we just simply do not have the capability of finding them places to live. So that's one thing. I think we've been remiss over 30 years in really keeping up with our housing availability and building enough housing units. I also think that during COVID, a lot of people were brought in to the hotels and into shelter because of the pandemic, where we wanted people not living in congruent situations. We asked people, the state, and this was a good thing the state did, that they asked the hotels to open up their rooms to homeless folks, or people who were, living with a family, and you were in a squished situation and you wanted to get people out and away from each other, because that's how COVID spread. Also, you had, at the time where we were offering these hotel rooms, you had a number of people who actually were homeless. We just didn't know about them because they were sleeping on people's couches or they were out in the woods. And they said, "Oh my gosh, okay, I finally have a shelter in a hotel room. I think I'll take the state up on this." And so suddenly we had more people than we knew we had coming forward into the hotel program. I also think that we still don't have a $15 an hour wage in this state. There are a lot of people who just don't make enough money. And by the way, at the same time that people are not making a livable wage, we also have expenses going up all over the place. It's a crisis now that we really need to deal with.
And we mentioned in the beginning that during the pandemic, especially, food insecurity disproportionately impacted people of color living in Vermont. Are there any contributing factors that result in that disparity?
We do in the film spend a lot of time in the family room, which is in the north end of Burlington. It's a wonderful place that serves a lot of new Americans and just low-income Vermonters in general. But we spent a lot of time with new Americans who had just come here over the last 2 or 3 years, and they're all working really, really hard, sometimes 2 to 3 jobs, and still it's very difficult for them to pay their expenses and find housing. So I think, unfortunately, this issue is hitting everyone, and it's something that a lot of people are struggling with right now across Vermont.
And you spent a lot of time in this documentary seeing people's day-to-day lives as they handled food or housing insecurity. What surprised you most about that experience kind of embedding there?
Well, to me, I'm always amazed at how resilient people are and how creative people are. I mean, if you are living on scarcity, if you do not have enough money to get through the month or barely have enough to pay your bills, you have to be really smart on how you spend your money. There's a whole scene in the film where Elisha, this one woman who has 5 kids, literally has, her food allotment, meal by meal, exactly what she's going to make, how she's going to use the leftovers, when her and her husband are going to eat with the kids and when they're not going to eat with the kids because there's not enough food to go around. I don't have to deal with that. I am a privileged person. I don't think about those things. But if you are a low-income person who's dealing with food insecurity, for instance, you have to figure out recipes and ways to use food and how to spend your money and when to get things on sale. And you have to go to the food shelf and use the services of the food bank. And all these things take time. They take ingenuity. Also, the same thing with housing. Many of these people in this film were working people who every day would get up and try to find housing. That's a lot of work. Calling, following up, looking at Craigslist, looking up the state website. Many of these people were extremely focused in their efforts. These people have dignity. They have a sense of, the need to keep their family together through these hard times. So I guess what I would say is the thing that I learned the most from hanging out with folks who are food and housing insecure is just that they are extraordinarily resourceful, and they are proud people, and they want to get out of this lifestyle. They want to they don't want to live in the hotels. They want to have a place that they can call their own, and they want enough food on their table. They are not lazy. They are hardworking folks.
And you've covered a variety of topics in the past, various different documentaries, including domestic abuse, women trying to escape domestic abuse, and leaving like prison reentry and certain components like that. Can you speak a little bit about any overlap you saw between maybe focusing on those other topics in Vermont and the way they interact with food insecurity?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I mean, substance abuse disorders addiction can be very much connected many times to these issues, because when you are under all this stress and you don't have enough money and you don't have a house, it can stress you out. And so when somebody offers you a pill that'll make you feel better, that's a really good relief for your stress. I'm not saying that happens to everybody, but I think that if you put people in stressful situations or throw them out onto the street, or they're living in a tent and freezing to death, and are alone and are, anxious and depressed, mental health and drug addiction can play a big part in that lifestyle. That doesn't mean that everybody who is homeless or who is dealing with food insecurity falls into those issues, but it can wreak havoc because you don't have a support system, because you don't feel grounded, because you feel alone, because you feel anxious, depressed, and so I think that when you create a situation where people are not being taken care of, a lot of things can go wrong. Domestic violence can go wrong. People get angry. People get frustrated. People take it out on each other. So really, as a society, if we want to look at how to mitigate a lot of these other issues like drug addiction, domestic violence.
Bess, I'm sorry, unfortunately, we're out of time, but thank you so much for joining us today.
Okay.
And Just Getting By is on tour now. Visit the website on your screen for more information on how you can watch the movie. That's our show for today. From the crew behind the scenes here at WCAX, thank you for watching and have a good one.